Hi, this is Ruth Bruner back with part two of our interview with Tom Buxman. We're going to talk more about, well, how many years you served the fire department as a volunteer, and then more about what Kodak was like, okay, when you started there.
Well, like I said, I joined the fire department in 1967, spent 25 years as a volunteer, and back then you could be a board member and also a volunteer, which is, you can't do that today, but I also was on the board of directors for 22 years. So actually that 43 years of service, fire service
Wow.
to the community.
Wow.
And then Kodak, I was hired at Kodak in November 30th, 1970. And I think I was one of the early ones being hired from Windsor, Illinois, to work out at Kodak, because they hadn't even opened the plant or anything. Our first 2 months that I was with the company was meeting and staying at the old sugar factory office right there on Main
Oh, because they didn't have the buildings built right away.
No, they didn't have, they were building them, but they weren't finished. And then they had a bunch of trailers on the property, and then we moved into that area and spent several weeks there, and then actually moved into my first building that I worked in, C13, which was, I was in what they called material services, or if you want, it was a storage warehouse of all this nuts and bolts and parts for equipment and stuff. So we would issue those out when they needed them and replenish the stock, anyway. And then from there, we were there, and that 13 is when they were putting in all the machines that they used to make the product. And the 13 was black and white paper, and then right next to that was Kodak sheet film, they called it. It was actually the X-ray product. And that was the first building that was open. And then they had the main office building, C11, which was the tall building, and then on the west side of that was C16, where, believe it or not, they made 110 film, Recordac film, and they also made 35 millimeter and 25 millimeter. And I didn't understand 25 millimeter, but that's what the professional football films are usually, 25 millimeter.
Oh,
film.
smaller? No, yeah.
Just a little bit smaller than the 35, yeah. And then from there, the group I was with, we moved over and shared the big distribution building. We had the back section of it. And we were in that building most of my career there. And I started out in the storeroom, and then I was fortunate enough to work my way up to the office and was doing the ordering and replenishing of supplies. And then I became a supervisor in '76. And then shortly after that, that's all of the machine spare parts and everything was in the warehouse that we had. And then they realized it would be more efficient if they moved the specific spare parts to the building where those machines actually ran. And so we didn't have to ship them and run them over there when they needed them. So we started what they called the service centers for that building, and I was a supervisor of those service centers. So I was able to, well, actually have people working in each one of the main buildings, and then somehow I wound up with the mail service out there too, as part of my responsibility. We would come into town, pick up the Kodak mail and take it out, and then we would internally deliver it and pick it up and stuff
And you
like
handled
that.
customer complaints? What was the most interesting one you got?
Well, you know, when I had those service centers, and, you know, I can honestly say I was probably one of the few people that actually knew that whole process from beginning to end. Because down in C50, those people knew their process. They would come in and it would go through a mixer and it looked like taffy.
Mm-hmm.
And then they would go through these machines that would spread it, and they would be 76 inches wide and 5,000 foot long.
Wow.
Rows of X-ray product or
Mhm.
graphic arts and stuff. Anyway, and then from there I went into sensitizing where it was coded, so I got to see that because I had people working there and they showed me the way around in there. And then the last 9 years I was out there, I transferred up to finishing in the sheet film area, which is the X-ray products. And one of my responsibilities shortly after I got there was to try to work with our customers on customer complaints. Because it's like anything else, you know, things don't always go the way you want. So anyway, that part of the process, you know, it was sometimes difficult. You know, we'd find out what it was, and we apologize and tell them to try to get it fixed. But we decided the best way to curtail as much of that defects on the film was maybe to get the people, because you could track down to the operator of that machine on that date
Wow.
what happened.
Uh-huh.
You know. So anyway, so on shift. So what I would do was when you get that, I'd track that back and find out what shift was on, what machine and stuff, and I would get those operators and I'd get the maintenance people there, and if their supervisor could be there, then that would be fine too. And then we would sit down and no finger pointing or anything, just what's going on here.
Mm-hmm.
And it really helped a lot because I got awarded a plaque for where and the Japanese was one of our biggest customers, and they're very efficient people. And they used to get pretty upset that there was a defect with the X-ray film especially. So anyway, I got an award for reducing the time frame from the time that we got the complaint to the time we answered and fixed the product.
Aha, your award.
Fixed the product, knocked it down 84 to 85% defects on that. And during that process, I guess they wanted to come out and see how we were doing things because it was getting better. And I know there was 3 or 4 different times Japanese people would come out and I'd take them to the dark room and show them what we did and why we did it. And we supplied them with night vision goggles so they could see a lot better than.
Was there a concern of people stealing the ideas, your intellectual property, you know, of the way things were done with Kodak versus Fuji or any of that? I mean, how did?
No, they really weren't, because, you know, there again, we would just go through there. We didn't give them a lot of the technology or something. We just, you know, like, you know, the X-ray films all corner round. Well, sometimes it wouldn't be a nice corner. There'd be a little hair hanging out. And if it was in the duplicating machines, you know, they were supposed to drop down with that little trigger was sticking out there. It would jam it.
Mm-hmm.
So then the X-ray technician would get pretty upset because he'd have to fix it. So I know that we got that corrected pretty quick after we started this process of getting the people that knew what's going on, why it was going on.
So all those different jobs you did, we spoke about in part 1 of the videos, all those things kind of made you a problem solver. And solution-minded person.
Kinda, yeah.
So-
It worked out with the company, and then retired from them.
What
there,
year?
and it's kind of sad to see what's
What
happening
year?
to them. Oh, I retired in November 30th, believe it or not, 1998.
Okay. So why do you think, the Kodak came first from Rochester, they expanded to Windsor,
Yeah,
and they chose Windsor because of the water and,
water, and they just thought it'd be a good location out here, yeah.
uh-huh. And
But I
then
think
what
the
brought
water had a
demise?
lot to do with
The
it,
water.
and the property,
And the property,
because they bought it from Great Western.
yeah.
Yeah.
They owned, where they all owned land at? Didn't they own not just where the Kodak buildings were, they owned all the way through Water Valley and Eastman Park, is that right or not?
No, Great Western still owned that,
Oh, Great Western did.
yeah. And there was also Great Western over in that area, so they got all the water rights and stuff from there, yeah. And I think when Water Valley started, I think that's when they were swapping land back and forth to,
Mhm.
for probably some more water rights or something,
Well-
but, yeah.
Kodak always wanted more farms to the east and not, what's the highway that runs between Kodak and what's Water Valley? Is that two?
257 runs
Yeah.
north and south.
Yeah, so that
Yeah.
put them all on the east side of 257,
Yeah.
so. Well, that's very, while we were speaking, I was thinking of you and the fireman races and some of the antics you guys did during the parade for the Harvest Festival. What kinds of things did you do with that for training or for fun? Because if you worked this hard, you had to have a little fun,
Oh,
not
we
just
did,
besides
and-
softball.
Yeah, and the fire races was a lot of fun, and they used to really be very strong up here in northern Colorado, which included some fire departments from Denver, clear out to Fort Morgan in northern Colorado. Fort Morgan was part of the Northern Colorado Firefighters Association, clear up to Estes Park, Anyway, yeah, we used to race. There was 4 or 6 man races, and it was kind of practicing, because the races would involve some evolution of firefighting. Like one of the races was called a replacement race. It took 5 lengths of hose, and you had to make believe, and there was a target. You put the first run of hose together, knock off a target, then the hose, quote, was act like it was supposed to be broke. You clamped the hose, exchanged the 50-foot hose, and shot the other target off. Of course, this was all against time, yeah, and the other team's competition. And then another race, I don't know if it had to be that, but it was called the ladder race. I maybe just go to a second story window because the ladder was only 24 foot tall, but there again, you hooked up to the hydrant and ran down the street and put on a nozzle with a hook on it, and then ran up the 24-foot ladder and hooked that hook on the very top rung of the ladder. And there again, it was all against time. And, another race was truck Y, which is the truck was stationary, and you would hook a 2.5-inch hose from the hydrant to the truck and turn the water on. Then you would, and 2 other guys would come around, put on a Y on the pipe that ran through the truck, and then 2.5 were hooked to that, and 2 targets were down at the end, and they had to shoot the target off or over. And there again, that was against time. And the other one was the street Y, which it's very similar to the truck, except you didn't go through a truck. You hooked onto the hydrant, turned the water on, hoped to get the Y on and the 2.5 together and knock the targets off. And they had races for the wives, the women too. They had 4 races too. They had 2 6 women and 2 4 women races, similar to the guys, but a lot of it was may have been put together already for them.
Tell her about your ladder.
Yeah, the ladder in the parade, I used
the
to see
parade.
some long red long johns.
Oh.
I mean, can you come back for the 100th anniversary of the
I don't
parade
know,
this
I don't know,
Labor
'cause
Day?
I think the back end where I rode, that you could swivel a little bit on the back end, I think it's disappeared or it broke, and it's too bad. That was a lot of fun, you know, several years ago, before I started doing it. Pete Walters used to run the back of it, and then they kind of got out of it. Nobody wanted to do it or something, I don't know. Well, then John Booner and I decided we ought to do that again, so he got got a lawn tractor, and we hooked that 24-foot extension ladder, if you will, and we put the wheels on the back that kind of swiveled, and I rode the back end of it, and you know, he could go down and I could swing that out to the side of the street and swing it back to the other side of the street. And we had a little bucket of candy we would throw out to the kids as we, I did, as I swung by them and stuff. Yeah, we did that for several years, and in fact, we were mandatory almost that we bring that up to a state convention and have it in the state convention parade after the state convention was over with, yeah. So we did, but it was fun.
And that one time John took off and Tom just went like this. He was
Yeah.
on his side.
Okay, so maybe that's why it's not still the parade, safety first, but,
It could be.
well, we're just about out of time, so is there
Okay.
anything else you want to speak about, Tom?
No, I know growth is inevitable, but you know, it's unbelievable how much Windsor has grown, you know, over the years.
Yes.
Really overwhelming to everybody, you know.
Yeah.
But you know, it's still kind of a close-knit community.
Because yeah, and your service and your volunteerism and your hard work has made it such, so thank you, Tom.
Thank you.